Okay, today's learning is dedicated Lili Nishmas Michal Sholem Chaim Ben Brian Ita. Neshama should have an aliyah.
David Lev.
David Lev is the father.
Yes.
Michal Sholem Chaim Ben David Lev. Neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen.
Okay. Okay, we were up to chapter 2. Just a few moments of review. There's actually a letter from the Rebbe that does like a little summary of chapter 1. And I think we mentioned this even last time, or even maybe the time before, that the Rebbe once commented that this section of Tanya is relevant for Gentiles as well. We know there's a pretty strict rule as to what parts of Torah can be taught to Gentiles, because Torah is commanded to Moshe and is in the inheritance of the Jewish people, and therefore there are certain limitations. But since the belief in Hashem and the reverence of Hashem is a mitzvah that is applicable to Gentiles, so the understanding of the unity of Hashem falls into that category as well. So the Rebbe explains that in the first chapter, we quoted, it's actually originally a medrash, and it became sort of popularized and nuanced by the Baal Shem Tov. So the Alter Rebbe attributes it to the Baal Shem Tov, that when the pasuk in Tehillim says that la'olam, under all circumstances, or always, or forever, or all of our degrees of awareness, Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim, Hashem's words are standing tall in the heavens. This is the highest form of creation, because we emphasize that it's not just that God created, past tense, the world. It's that Hashem is creating the world consistently and constantly, which we'll get to in some more nuanced detail as the chapter unfolds. And therefore, as we said in the last chapter, even this physical world, even this world that does not have an intuitive awareness of godliness, is continuously and is only in existence because it's sustained by Hashem. And even those ideas, and we use the example of a stone, which is comprised of the letters Aleph, Beis, Nun, Even, stone, even though you won't find in the 10 statements of creation when God said, let there be, he doesn't at any point say, let there be stones. So how could stones exist? And we explained because God created all of these energy forms, which then are reconfigured into the particular illustrations and manifestations. And this is essentially what we are able to do to turn nature into art, but creation is the exclusive purview of Hashem. So it's not only that in our perception, we see certain things that are more obviously godly and less obviously godly. They are, in fact, more energized by godliness, or more directly energized by godliness, or sustained, or less so. And this is also indicated in the pasuk that we opened the previous chapter with, which you recognize. We incorporated in the daily davening. It comes from Sefer Devarim, where it says, and you should know this day and take it unto heart, that Hashem is God, Bashamayim mima'al, in the heavens above, that is in the creation of the heavenly, the naturally associated, the more intuitively aware of godliness, V'al haaretz mitachas, and on the earth below, even in the earthly matters, those concepts, those items which are intuitively less aware of godliness, potentially not even at all aware of godliness, ein oid, there's nothing that doesn't exist only from, and that's a double negative, that is, everything only exists because Hashem is creating in the current tense and sustaining its existence. Nothing has independent, innate existence. It's only because Hashem is giving it existence. How is that so? You know, this classic thing, well, what does Torah know about spaceships and about the brain surgery? And the idea is that it's a reconfiguration of all that was given to us. So again, Hashem creates nature. We turn nature into art. Hashem gives us skill, intelligence, wisdom, craftsmanship, innovation, desperation, all the different motives of our existence. So again, the distinction is in the awareness of the investiture, what we call in Hebrew the hislapshus, from the word for garment, of the godliness within the physical. So sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's even more obvious. It's the degree of awareness. Now, Um, as we're about to now go into the second chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to address head on, which is one of the curious things about Tanya, that it takes these questions head on as opposed to trying to respond to someone who portrays a question. So I'll begin with an illustration, which you're all familiar with. It's not very seasonal, but you'll understand the reference. We know that in the month of Elul, the month leading up to Tishrei, we talk about a lot of messages about that month, even though that month doesn't have any of its own holidays. It is, though, the warm-up or the preparation for the month of Tishrei. And there's lots of explanations about it. One that's very popular, it's even quoted in Shaar, is that the word Elul is an acronym for a quote from the Song of Songs. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. The first letter of each of those four words in Hebrew, ani, li doidi, vid doidi li, is an acronym of the word Elul. Then we also talk about in Hasidus how in the month of Elul, the king is in the field, that we are doing our regular thing. There are no holidays. And you look up and, hey, surprise, here's the king. So Chassidus asks the obvious question. These two ideas seem to be in direct contradiction to each other. The first point is, I am to my beloved is to me. That is, who initiates, who begins this changed relationship in the month of Elul? I do. Ani, I am, I'm here, I exist, and I make an effort to connect with Hashem. I make an entree to be aligned with Hashem. The other explanation, the king is in the field, is I'm just doing my regular thing. And I look up and there is Hashem. The king comes to the field. So which one is it? Am I initiating this relationship, or is Hashem initiating this relationship? So Chassidus explains that, of course, Hashem is initiated because everything is initiated by Hashem. But we, maybe this is more male than female, don't tell me what to do. I thought of it on my own. I thought of it on my own. But so why is it that I wake up one morning and I have suddenly this inspiration to be more attentive to my relationship with Hashem? Why is it that suddenly I am what's the word I'm looking for? I am motivated. I am inspired to be closer to God. What happened? Answer: Hashem subtly kickstarted that whole process. But it has to be done subtly, because if it's done overwhelmingly, then one of two things. One is, my harsher is, don't tell me what to do. The mere fact that Hashem is trying to tell me what to do evokes this response that is a pushback. Or I say, oh, okay, if Hashem told me to do it, then I'll do it. But then, of course, it's Hashem doing it, and I am not as participatory. I'm just being obedient. Of course, I stop at the stop sign. There's the policeman. So I'm not a stop sign stopper. I'm just practical. Or I'm so inspired by it because it's so whips me up into such a frenzy, or whatever it may be. But it's not of myself. So here we have this constant sort of push me, pull me that exists within our relationship with Hashem. Is it about me and my inspiration and what is meaningful to me, works for me, etc.? Or is it about Hashem, and Hashem is the source of this inspiration? Now, in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to come right out and challenge something that on the one hand seems rather obvious, but on the other hand, if we think about it deeply and we take it very specifically, it completely upsets everything about the standard perception of our of existence, not just of our relationship with Hashem and so on. It completely turns everything on its head. Now, we are all familiar, because at some point somebody has asked us, where they say, why do you believe in God? Now, this becomes essentially a misdirection, because in that statement, there is a presupposition that I exist. I mean, I'm here. That's what I take for granted. And now I have to think about whether or not I also think that God is here. I think God is here. He thinks God isn't here. I can give you this evidence. But again, it's the old who's fact checking the fact checkers. What is supporting that evidence? What is to say that that evidence is valid evidence? And so on, only because it fits within my parameter. Now, there are going to be certain truths which simply are a truth because that's the rules, meaning every time you pass go, you collect $200. Otherwise, you're not playing Monopoly, meaning Hasbro created the rules, so those are the rules. So we say the rules of logic are the rules of logic because we've all agreed upon it. But is Hashem beholden to Newtonian physics and Euclidean geometry and the rules of grammar and justice and et cetera, et cetera? On the one hand, yes, Hashem tells us that he operates under the process of justice, that God is just and so on. On the other hand, why do we think that that's called just? And not every society thinks that's called just. I mean, think about the varieties. And I'm not only talking about in the extremes. Even in this country, state to state, they have different nuances. In this state, this is 55. In this state, the speed limit is 65. Who's right? They're each trying their best guess. There isn't an absolute truth to it. So the Alter Rebbe is here transforming essentially our entire perspective. I mean, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but in a way I do mean to be melodramatic about the complete upheaval that the Alter Rebbe is introducing to our whole existence. You know, what are the real things? We all know the story with the previous Rebbe when they threatened him with a gun, and he said, that is persuasive for people with one life or one world and many gods. Meaning, what does it mean, many gods? It means this is important. Well, it's not more important, but that's more important. That's more important. What's the most important thing? My one world. And if you're threatening to take away my world, that is, they threatened him with the pistol, they threatened to kill him, to take away his world. So then that's God. That's meaning when we say God, we mean that's the ultimate determinant of my behavior. But if I have one God in many worlds, so we're not cavalier, we're not dismissive, say, sure, take this world away, I don't care. If a person has $10 million, they don't say, well, just take one, that doesn't bother me. But what is the absolute single determinant of their existence is God. And therefore, if you say, I'm going to take away your life or violate God, then he has to give away his life. Not because life is unimportant and not because, again, we're not cavalier about it, et cetera. That's not the concept. The concept is, this is what is absolutely important to me. That is the one Hashem. And actually, important is even the wrong word. That's not even the right word. This is what is absolutely determinative in my life. And everything else is only validated because of how it serves Hashem. That is, Hashem is the validation, in contrast to saying, I am the validation. I mean, this becomes a complete upheaval. In America, very generally speaking, we have a rule of thumb that I can do whatever I want as long as I don't bother anybody else. That's not a Torah value. We don't say, well, you can eat whatever you want as long as nobody else knows. That's not true. That is, a person can't decide what they're going to eat, who they're going to marry, what clothes they're going to wear. Wool is good, linen is good, wool linen is not good. I'm just doing it in my room. I'm just doing it in private. Doesn't matter. A, we're never in private because Hashem is with us all the time. So it's not like I'm not hurting anyone, but I mean, Hashem is right here. That's A. B, or more importantly, I guess, whichever one is A or B, it's not mine to say that I'll do. Meaning, if I lend you my lawnmower, you expect it to use it as a lawnmower, not to break rocks. It's not designed just for my personal convenience. So here, the Alter Rebbe takes on not only the theological and the philosophical, but this whole premise as to what is real. What do you have to do? What do you have to do? And again, you know, it's easy for me because I'm in the rabbi business, but people who are out there in the real world who have real jobs, they say, well, if you don't work on Saturday, we're going to fire you. It's just one Saturday a year, I promise. So if the world says, well, what do you mean? You have to pay your bills. You have to, then you consider it. But if you say, what do you mean? Shabbos, you have to. Everything else, you don't have to. Everything else is only valid because Hayom, Yom, Rishon, LeShabbos. Today is 1 day till Shabbos, 2 days till Shabbos. Everything is validated because of how it supports Shabbos, my relationship with Hashem. Then the idea of, well, I have to work, then you don't have to. That's not called a have to. And again, you think we can all extrapolate about how radical a change this is. See, here we go in chapter 2. And again, just like in the Sefer Shel Beinanim, when a chapter begins with the letter Vav, that's an indicator that it's a continuation of the theme that we've talked about. And essentially, if we wanted to summarize what is the theme of the Shaarikh Bamuna, it's that God is, and everything else is subject to that validation. In Hebrew, it's Elokus, godliness, Bipshitas, that's obvious. And Bria and the whole creation, that's Hischachus, that's innovative. Wow, look at that, there's a creation. That shouldn't be expected. And again, I can only imagine that everybody's had some form of this conflict. When you say this out in the world, people become hysterical, and because it is literally threatening their entire value system, which says, what's important is, and we've heard this say, well, what Jews think is important is education, and Jews think it's important to be a professional Jew. No, what we think is important is Torah, ein oid, that's it. And everything else is validation, is only how it supports that. And this is what's going on. We think about just things that are going on in the modern world, just to pontificate for a moment. In New York, there's this whole movement that they want to be able to regulate the education. Because they say, well, what do you mean? How can these people be productive, healthy citizens if they don't know Aristotle or math or biology or chemistry and so on? And the back and forth and so on, and the political side, which we'll put to the side for a moment. But again, the essential point is, well, these are the things that are absolutely valid. How could you go through life and not know Aristotle? Well, how could someone go through life and not know the Alter Rebbe? How could you go through life and not know Rambam? How could you go through the whole life and not know Talmud? Well, no. Those are extras. That's not what. But our counter argument is it's not even 1, 2. It's 1, and therefore nothing else has validity, like the Alter Rebbe mentioned earlier in Tanya, that the reason why there's a value in knowing math is because it supports Torah. Even if that means, yes, it supports having a parnasa, an abundant parnasa. And why? To support Torah. And that becomes the validator. And that's not the validator out there in the world. So here we go. Bihine, Mikan, from here, based on this idea. And again, the idea being that the world has no innate existence. All of existence is a constant push against nature. If you remember the analogy of throwing the ball in the air, if you look at it, you say, oh, the ball's flying. Well, the ball is not innately flying. It's been energized by the thrower, but it's not an innately flying item. That's pushing against nature. The nature is for the ball to be on the floor. It's, yes, in the moment, it looks like it's a flying object, but it's only because it has energy that is sustaining it, do the physics breakdown. So the Alter Rebbe says, Shuvas haminim, a response to the minim, and I'm going to talk about what that means because it's a very harsh word. It's real harsh. But I just want to go, and I'll come back in a moment. The Giloi Sherish to Usam, and the revelation of the root. And remember, we talked before about the difference between a foundation and a root. A foundation is laid and everything's built on top of it. A root, like in a tree, is continuously nourishing. And in this case, it's nourishing a mistake. And it's again, I don't mean to be overly Freudian, but what is driving this life perspective that we are going to now debunk? We're going to get there, just to go a few more words here. HaKoifrim b'hashgacha pratis, who are denying hashgacha pratis. Now, we all know that phrase, but I want to nuance and tweak it out in a moment. Uva'oisis u'moifsei haTorah, and the signs and miracles in Torah. Shetoyim, that they make a mistake, and that's not like a mistake like I thought 2 + 3 was 5. I mean, it's a fundamental perspective of a violation. I don't know what the word is. In their false, but we'll talk about that word as well. Each of these words we're going to squeeze and our comparison. Shemidamin, that they make a comparison of Maaseh Hashem, Moiseh Shemayim Va'aretz, the deeds of God who made the heavens and earth, L'maaseh Enish V'tach B'loisav, to the deeds of human beings and their fumblings. Okay, and then we'll let's go a few more lines and then we'll come back because I want to get the concept. Key, because Kasher Yatzel L'Tzeiref, Kli, once a tool is formed, that is, you take wood and you make it into a desk, you take an ingot of metal and you turn it into a pot. So then this pot is no longer linked or dependent on the hands of the craftsman. Even though the craftsman has pulled his hands away, and he went on into the marketplace, and we'll talk about that word as well. Then the kli, the pot or the desk, it doesn't change. The artisan has long gone. He's long ago forgotten that he made that desk or that pot, and the pot continues on. Kach, in the same way, midam and hasichli. These fools, pretty harsh words, make a comparison to Hashem's creation of heaven and earth. Okay, and then you can sort of see where this is headed, and we will get to it in a few moments, where the Alter Rebbe says that creation doesn't have independent existence. But I want to go back here to a couple of important terms here. Let's start with a couple of lines. What are meaning? He says this is a response to the meaning. Now, if you Google the word meaning, it comes up like you may recognize on Sukkot. We talk about the arba meaning. So the word translates as species or types. It's an odd phrase, but there's a little history to it. We know nothing new under the sun. There's always been a movement of know betters. I know better than everybody else. You think new Coke was a bad idea? So everyone's had a bad idea. Coke's been around for 100 years. It's the most successful, recognizable brand in the world. But a Chacham decided, I had a better idea. So everybody's got a better idea. So the people who had the better idea back in the times of the Talmud, they called themselves, because the name is important, they said, we are maminim. We believe. We're the true believers. Everything else has been corrupted. We are the true believers. We are maminim. So whenever they wanted the community wanted to refer to them, they didn't want to use that word maminim because it's a complimentary word. So instead, they referred to them as the minim, which is a play on the word maminim, and it's a dismissive. They're like a type. They're a certain type. You know who they are. So the word minim really carries a harsh phrase. It's like you don't even want to refer to them by their own title. So when the Alter Rebbe says Chuvas Haminim, he is categorizing people of this perspective in a pretty harsh form. Pretty harsh. Now, this reveals the root, we said, of their mistake. Now, when we say in English a mistake, it seems like oops, but here it's more deliberate than an oopsie. It's about a perspective, a false perspective. It's not just about I made a wrong turn. I made a left instead of a right. So the word mistake is too soft for what the Alter Rebbe means here. And again, the shoirish, the root, because that means it's constantly nourishing this mistake, this misapplied, which manifests itself in the denial of Hashgacha Pratis. Now, we all know the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. It's fundamental to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. But of course, it way precedes the Baal Shem Tov, and it's important to know that there are, I'm talking about Torah people, I'm talking about like Rambam, who don't see Hashgacha Pratis the way the Baal Shem Tov saw it. So we, of course, we would never do this, but we have to be cautious. We say it so dismissively, but there are other, and I'm talking about serious Torah sources that have a different perspective about Hashgacha Pratis. Now, on the one hand, I think it's fair to say, and here's where slogans get in the way, Torah absolutely across the board supports the idea of Hashgacha Pratis. But then, of course, the question is, what does Hashgacha Pratis mean? So we know from the Baal Shem Tov, the most extreme illustration is that when the leaf spins in the wind, 67 degrees and not 68 degrees, that is Hashem turning that leaf very particularly. Now, others deny that. That is, they argue that hashgacha pratis only refers to human interaction, that it's only that which affects human beings that is hashgacha pratis. And the example is that what I think it's the Pelican, right, that swoops in and pulls the fish out of the water. Is that pelicans? Whatever it is. Anyway, that Fred the Pelican should get Charlie the tuna and not his cousin. That's not hashgacha pratis, right? That pelicans eat tuna fish is hashgacha pratis. But unless you can walk me through step by step how that would have some distinctive impact on a person, it's not hashgacha pratis. And this is where just a little nuanced point that we have to be careful. We all love the hashgacha pratis stories. They're all great hashgacha pratis stories. Here's where we need a little caution, because the Yetzer Hara works his way. He goes, oh yeah, I love that story. Because then if you could tell me, and as a result, the person met their basher, they got a job. It's hashgacha pratis, even if they don't see the outcome of it. Meaning, if the person made the left turn instead of the right turn and got lost and didn't get, that's also hashgacha pratis. Meaning, it's not just hashgacha pratis when we have a happy ending. We love those stories, but here's where we got to be a little cautious about it. So, the Alter Rebbe, of course, following the Baal Shem Tov, is even when the leaf turns in the wind to protect the worm that was being discomforted by the heat of the sun, that has no immediate line that you could draw to any human interaction, that is also hashgacha pratis. So what's the dispute? Is it, well, Hashem, what I call what's your oh come on tolerance level? Oh come on, so our oh come on is 0, because it's not that Hashem is watching that blade of grass. The blade of grass only exists because Hashem is giving it creation. Meaning, there's 2 ways of seeing it. One is there's a blade of grass and Hashem is paying attention to it, or there only can be a blade of grass because Hashem is creating that blade of grass at this moment. It's not that the blade of grass exists independently and it is thus being supervised by Hashem. Excuse me. Rather, the blade of grass can only be in existence because Hashem is supervising it at this precise moment. And this is the crucial difference. So in the broadest sense of the word, we know that there's deism and theism. One is I believe in God, but I don't believe he has anything to do with my life. Yes, God created the world, to use an analogy, like the Wright brothers created the first airplane, but we've moved on from there. Thank you very much, and we'll pay gratitude and so on. And the other is the theism that God is continuously involved, but it's more than that here. It's not that God is involved in the world. The world can only exist because Hashem is giving it existence, as I said, with the blade of grass. So what are the oisis and moifsim of Torah, the signs and wonders? So we think, what's the miracles? And we're going to talk about this in this chapter, in the next chapter. So we think the splitting of the sea, wow, that's a miracle. And our argument is, or our position is, really it's every moment. In fact, the Talmud has an interesting discussion. It talks about Hallel. And it says, what warrants the recitation of Hallel? So the Gemara says, what if a person wants to say Hallel every day because the sun rises? So it debates, says, no, we're not. Now, what's the difference? Why is the sun rising not a miracle? And the sea splitting is a miracle? Essentially, it is kind of arbitrary. It's a little arbitrary. Because, right, why do we expect the sun to rise in the east and set in the west? Because it's done it that way every day for 5,700 years. So every day it's a miracle. Every moment, the story in the Gemara about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, whose daughter, they had no oil to light Shabbos candles. He said, Hashem makes oil light, he'll make vinegar light. Meaning, why do we suppose that oil lights and vinegar doesn't light? Only because for the last 5,700 years, that's how it's been. But we don't really know that. It's not innately that oil lights and vinegar doesn't light. That's not an absolute. That's what it looks like. That's how it's been. And yes, it's more likely than not. And Torah requires us to rely on that process. So, right, it's a little arbitrary why we call this a miracle and that not a miracle. It's a little arbitrary, but we're going to go with it. We're going to work with it. Now, what is the innate mistake? That they make a false analogy. Now, what is the premise of this false analogy? It is the presupposition of my own existence. The fact that I think that I exist, and therefore all things are valid. Excuse me. All things are, yes, we got a raised hand.
Tomorrow, though,
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Say again, please.
tomorrow, like, we could wake up and all of a sudden there could be some scientific discovery that vinegar lights, and it wouldn't be actually scientific, but it would be Hashem, right? Because Hashem's changing.
Correct. And we are living through it ourselves. Look what we have lived through, and with technology, Zoom, everything. I mean, again, if we went back, I'm not talking about 1,000 years ago. I'm talking about in our own lifetimes, and it's free, etc. So why isn't this a miracle? Why are we saying Shechiyanu every time the car turns on, every time the computer turns on, and so on? You think about the functioning of our biology, etc. Right. So here's an interesting nuance, perhaps. Let's say tomorrow we see how to light vinegar. Does that mean that vinegar's always been lightable? We just didn't know how, or that it changed? Meaning now Hashem made that vinegar lights and oil doesn't light. So, right, it shouldn't really surprise. Every day it's a brand new day, to use a very simplistic analogy. If a team wins the game yesterday, they don't start ahead today. Every game is a brand new game. Every opportunity is a brand new opportunity. There's no carryover from the previous. Every day completely random. Now, there is some discussion about this. I mean, just to take it to one step further, we've all heard the phrase, you can't rely on miracles. That's a halachic phrase. You may not rely on miracles. What's the source of this story? Or what's the illustration of this idea? So the Gemara tells us that when the Jews would do the Carbon Pesach, so remember, the Carbon Pesach was not done on the actual temple grounds. It was done like on a side courtyard, and everybody had to come. It was pretty busy. So they did it in shifts. So the first shift would come in, they'd close the gates, the people would slaughter their Carbon Pesach, they'd move them out, the next gate would come, the next one would come in. Now, the Gemara says that every year there was a miracle. The gates would close miraculously. So then, being that we our desire to overanalyze everything, so the Gemara says, so is it required to station a gate closer by the gates? Meaning, for 400 years of the Beis Hamikdash, every Erev Pesach, the gates closed miraculously. Is it necessary to station a guard? So the Gemara says yes. Why? Because you can't rely on miracles. But we have to further overanalyze that. So there's two ways of thinking about it. What does it mean you can't rely on miracles? One is you may not rely on miracles. You're not allowed to. We have a rule of thumb that if something occurs routinely, we can consider it reasonable to continuously occur. I mean, even science would say that. A true scientist would say it's more likely than not to repeat itself in the lab. So far, every time we added 2 and 3, we got 5. Is it possible that tomorrow we'll add 2 and 3 and we'll get a different number? Of course it's possible. But it is more likely than not that we will repeat the same. But so it's more, or we say no. This idea that it's more likely than not is in nature. So if something occurs in nature, once it's a fluke, twice it's a curiosity, 3 times it's a pattern. We have this in criminal behavior, we have this in expected behavior, etc. So miracles don't fall under that category. So again, here's the nuance. What do we call a miracle? And what do we call reasonable expectation? 2 people have the same issue, one is healed, one isn't. What, right? It's somewhat arbitrary, but at some level we say, okay, this is considered nature. What is nature? Remember, the word for nature in Hebrew means sunken, like a sunken ship. And the idea is that God is sunken into the world. Okay. So what is the core of their mistake? Like we would call it the Freudian analysis. What is the core of it? And the answer is that they make the essential mistake of comparing or presuming that everything functions like I function. It's no different. I've told you the story before. When I was in the yeshiva in England, I'd been there a while, a kid who I didn't know said to me, "You're American." And I was like a little surprised because I kind of knew my way around. I said, "Why? I could tell from your accent." And I said, "Listen, kid, I don't have an accent. This is how normal people talk. You have an accent." Right? So this is the mistake. We presume that what we do, what we experience, that's what we consider to be the basis. And everything else is considered a deviation. I told you this story. I was once, talking to these two people, non-Jews, about the Jewish culture, and somehow we mentioned that that Hebrew is read right to left. So one of them said, "Oh, that's interesting." He wrote down, you read it backwards. And the other one, to their credit, not mine, said, "It's not backwards, it's right to left." Like if you portray it as backwards, you're essentially saying there's a standard and you are weird or better or less than better, whatever it is. But this is the mistake. The mistake is we begin the presumption that everything is like me. What is the presumption? What is the particular pattern that we mistakenly analogize, if that's how you say it, to Hashem, is how we, and again, here's the key word, here's the trick, create things. Because again, as I've emphasized, we don't create things. We take raw material and reconfigure it into something else. What's the example of that? That's with the craftsman. So the craftsman doesn't create a desk or a pot. He takes the wood that's there and he reconfigures it. And he'll get your own dirt. That story. He reconfigures it. So what has he done? He's only reconfigured it. As such, the finished product, just like the original material, is not dependent on the craftsmanship of this guy. It has independent existence, which is fueled by Hashem. That's the point they're missing. That's the mistake they make. And here's where the Alter Rebbe continues. However, toch mades einehem. It's a pretty harsh phrase here. The Alter Rebbe says that their eyes are like muddied. There's like mud on their eyes. Hahevdel hagadol, the great difference. And we say great difference. What's the difference between a difference and a great difference? So it's not just big difference. Like there's a difference between 1 and 5, and there's a big difference between 1 and 500. It's more than that. It is completely conceptually turned upside down. Now, again, we mentioned this before. We know this. We are blessed to see it from time to time, maybe even more regularly. When a person starts to change their relationship with Hashem. So some of the difficult things are, they used to go to the movies Friday night. Now they go to shul. They used to go to one restaurant. Now they go to different restaurants. And that's not a small thing. It's a very difficult thing. The most difficult thing is at some point they have to realize that which they had invested their life in heretofore, whatever it is, university, success, government, social stature, the country club life, and thinking that this was going to be their purpose, then they have to say, you know what, that's not a value. And it's a very, very difficult thing. It's a very dramatic and potentially traumatic shift. In some ways, more than changing their diet and their weekend plans and their wardrobe, etc. Because it is renouncing that which they had valued heretofore. And it's very difficult. And sometimes people get to a certain point and they're moving along in their Yiddishkeit, and they change their weekend plans, and they change their restaurants, and they change their wardrobe, and they change and then they bail because they recognize that at some point I have to kind of, chatasi like we do, which is hard. And not just I made a mistake, that is a fundamental. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is referring to here. Now, curiously, or instructively, I should say, in the 10th of Rambam's 13 principles of faith, the Yud Gimel Ikrim, which are summarized, they were originally written out in a lengthier form in the Perush HaMishnayos, in his commentary on the Mishnayos, the Rambam writes, it's principle number 10, I'll just read to you, the Almighty knows the actions of people and does not ignore them. It is not like those who say God has abandoned the land, but rather, like Torah says, the Almighty saw there was great evil perpetrated by man in the land. That's in the story leading up to the flood. The Almighty said the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great. That is, Hashem is the world, not just that he created the world once upon a time. Thank you very much. Like you call your mother on Mother's Day, but you move on. But to feel it and see it in that sense. So that's what we mean here, or this is what the Alter Rebbe is underscoring by saying it's a great difference. Again, not just like, 1 to 5 and 1 to 5 million, but it's great in that it is completely transformative. Essentially, it's like an infinite difference. The two are not compatible. It's not a tweak. It's a complete reforming of life perspective. And that's in part what makes it so difficult. Like I said, more than just changing our weekend plans and blah, blah. Okay. The difference between human stumblings. And it's kind of like a little insulting word. Tachboloisav means like to fumble around. I've quoted this before, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Olav Shalom, he points out that in the story of the Tower of Babel, where the people think they're making this incredibly impressive tower, so Torah uses almost humor, he calls it a humorous remark, when it says God came down, like with his little magnifying glass. What's that little thing you made down there? We're so proud of our iPads and so on. Who are you kidding? You think you're impressing? In contrast to when the person serves Hashem, because if you have a $50,000 car, but you don't got the $1 spark plug, you got this, but you're missing one screw, you're of tsaris, as we say. You got troubles. So why is that one screw so valuable in this tower? Not because the one screw allows for the whole car, etc. You recognize its indispensability. Whereas when something tries to stand out of its own, it's like I give you all the bracha, you should never know about your internal organs. They should just work. You don't ever want to get a call from your doctor about your pain. I don't want to know about it. Nobody wakes up and says, my teeth feel great this morning. When do we notice our teeth? When they don't feel so great. So you should never notice them. This is the point Alter Rebbe is making, and I think what he's underscoring by calling it a hevdel hagadol, the great difference. Again, it's not just, this is a bigger, biggest kind of thing. Shehu yesh mi yesh. What is human behavior? It is something from something. So again, just look at this, and we have talked about this so many times. Even I recognize myself repeating myself. We talk about that God created the world yesh, something from nothing. So, take a poll. You want to be something or nothing? Oh, I'm something. You're a thing? I'm not a thing. Imagine, you don't have to imagine or whatever, recognize that Torah values nothing infinitely more than something. Well, that's crazy. Who wants to be nothing? Right. It's not a thing. That's very disturbing. I mean, you think about this, and it even trickles into Torah people. Make something of yourself. You'll make something of yourself. It doesn't sound so bad. It actually sounds pretty good. But we would say you're nothing and you can do something. The story of the man who was crying and his friend said, what's the problem? He says, I just read, we come from dust and we go to dust. So he says, so why are you crying? But said, we came from gold and you go to dust. For that, you should cry. But we come from dust, we go to dust, but in between we can serve Hashem when we're like that spark plug, it makes the whole engine run. So this is a fundamental change. I mean, you think about the American mentality, that first day at high school, what do you want in your life? Now go out there and do it and, be somebody and make something and make a name for yourself. This is that whole mentality that we are now negating, and it's not very comfy. We're not digging it unless we're ready to shift. And again, if we see it in people, as they're making their progress in Yiddishkeit, they get to a point where they go, 1 second, there's a problem here. I mean, yes, I can change, like I said, my restaurants, etc. Okay. What's the mistake? They make the mistake and they think, look, this guy took a piece of metal and he turned it into a pot. So too, Hashem, he's creative. I create, you create. It's all the same. The fundamental difference, of course, is that we human beings are reconfiguring. We turn yesh into yesh. We turn one thing into another thing. But it's the thing that's the trick. Getting the thing. That's the difference. Shu yesh mi'ayin. God creates, he turns yesh into ayin. I'm sorry, he turns yesh from ayin. And that yesh, that thing, which has no innate natural existence, is forever dependent on the sustaining power of its source. So again, it's not that Hashem is overseeing that blade of grass. The blade of grass could only exist because Hashem is making it exist. And not only could it stop existing if Hashem stops sustaining it, Hashem can make it that it never existed, because it never really had true existence. Just like if I tell you, that we use the example of the short story, a long story. If I tell you this is Joe and he's a dentist and he's 35 and he's married to Jane and she's a lawyer and she's 32, how old is Joe? He's 2 seconds old. I just made him. I just created him now, and he doesn't have real existence. I just made it up. And if I change the book and it's not Joe and Jane and 3 kids, it becomes 2 kids, that kid is never, he existed for 50 pages. I threw those 50 pages out, it's gone. And that is even more fantastic than splitting the sea. Meaning that Hashem turns water into a wall. Okay, it's one thing into another thing. And you think about what we are capable of doing. What we did, I don't know how it works, but how they turn sand into computer chips and silicon, et cetera, so that Hashem should turn water into a wall is pretty exciting, but it's not as fantastic as creating water. The creation of water itself, the sun rising, is a greater miracle, but we've become accustomed to it. That's all. Al derech Moshe. What happened there? So here the Alter Rebbe looks at it, and again, this is not unique to the Alter Rebbe. We know this from other contexts, that in Torah, whenever we want to use the model of something that is a miraculous, we talk about splitting the sea. Something is, you want to say it's fantastic, you split the sea. It's like splitting the sea. It's like splitting the sea. It's harder than splitting the sea. It's almost as hard as splitting the sea. That's the standard model. Greatest thing since sliced bread. What was sliced bread the greatest thing since? I don't know. It must have been something else. But it became almost, and I don't mean this disparagingly, a cliche. But now the Alter Rebbe says, let's look at that splitting of the sea and understand why, as impressive as it is, it's still not as great as creation. So here we go. What did Hashem do? He pushed back the sea with a wind. So there was a sea, and Hashem pushed the sea back. He pushed it back. Kol halayla, all night. V'yibaku hamayim. Hashem split the sea. V'nitzvu, and it stood. Kamoi nod ukachayma. It stood like a wall, and a wall that was solid. So here the Alter Rebbe uses 2 words, nod and chayma, like a solid and a wall, because there's essentially 2 miracles. 1, the sea split; it became like a wall. 2, it became water, but water that doesn't flow. Again, Hashem turned Moshe's stick into a snake, and a snake into a snake, and then the Yam Suf into blood, and so on. But what happened here? The Alter Rebbe made it split, and he made it water that doesn't run. Meaning, we also can contain water. You put it in a pot, it's contained. but as soon as you take away the pot, it spills. Hashem split the sea and made water not flow, changed the nature of that water, changed its character. Vilu hifsek Hashem es haruach kirega, but Hashem was blowing that wind, just like the pot. As soon as you take the pot away, it spills all over the place. Hayomayim chayzer minigrim memayra kedarkam v'tivam v'lekamo kachayim b'li safek after teva zebamayim gan came nibra mechudesh yesh miyayin shechayim esabarim netzeves miyatzma b'li ruach raksha teva mayim enu came. So why is it that water flows? Rocks don't flow. Rocks stand as a wall forever because Hashem created it that way. That's how Hashem made it. Hashem made it, like we talked about with the oil and the vinegar. Hashem made it that water flows and rocks are stationary. What happened? Hashem split the sea. And again, Hashem can do whatever he wants, but in order to do that, Hashem had to, and I'm using that word almost half sarcastically. What do you mean he had to? Do whatever he wants. But what Hashem did is he blew the wind. He pushed back against the water. And therefore, the water didn't flow. As soon as he took away that counter force, the water went back to doing what it does. Meaning the water was water, but it wasn't flowing. But creation is completely unnatural. Meaning the natural state of being is non-being. It takes a chiddush, an innovative effort from Hashem to give the world its very basic existence. That is, everything exists. It occupies space. And then it has its nuance. Water flows, rocks stay. So why are we shocked that water stands strong, stands tall? Rocks do, because water is not rock. So Hashem created it that way. Hashem created that water flows. He could have created that water stands still and rocks. I mean, that's ice, stays, and so on. He could have. But creation is beyond nature. There's an interesting statement the Alter Rebbe makes in the Kutei Torah that he says, what's holy? The garment of the tallis or the strings? So of course we say, well, the strings, the garment. He says, no, the garment is holier. Why then do you make the bracha on the strings? Because that's a holiness we can contain. The holiness of the garment is so great, you can't even make a bracha on it. It's like we explain, a minhag is so lofty, you can't even command it. Of course, we presume that the commandments are more significant, sanctified than the minhag. But in a sense, the minhag is greater. That's why there is an argument that you could live without the mitzvahs, but you can't live without the minhagim, which I know seems completely upside down. But if a person is just doing the mitzvahs without the minhagim, the life expectancy of those mitzvahs sometimes dwindles, whereas the minhagim can bring the person to the mitzvahs. Okay, we have a raised hand. What can we do for you?
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
So did you just say that the tzitzis strings, the garment is holier, but we make the bracha on the tzitzis strings?
Yes.
So, I mean, this is a little off, but then why do we put the strings in Shemus and we don't put the garment in?
Because because the godliness that comes in the strings is a godliness we can appreciate. And the godliness in the garment is one we don't appreciate. Meaning essentially, why do we throw grass out? Why are we cutting grass? Don't you know God is sustaining the grass? The question was, why can we discard the garment, but we have to treat the strings with greater sanctity? Essentially the same thing. Why do we throw out plastic cups? Don't you know God is sustaining that plastic cup? Okay, but here we don't see the godliness. Does that mean the godliness is less? So we're not counterintuitive. It's better that way. Because these Lubavitchers are. Everything, it's better that way. It's always better that way. Right? This is that upside down. This is what we can appreciate. That's why we say, the stones will cry out, why are you walking on me? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm a stone. And if you're not doing Torah, then what are you walking on me for? So which is greater? If a person doesn't do mitzvahs, then the insect says to him, you just came here on the 6th day. We've been here for 5 days already. But if we do what we're supposed to do, then we bring everything into its purpose. Okay. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Why are we so impressed by Kriyas Yamsuf? It's more impressive than I'm sorry, it's the opposite. Creation is more impressive. Look at that, creation. Allah is kama. How do you know? Because if Hashem were to stop creating us, we would never have existed. What do you mean? I've lived so many years, I've done it. No, it could be completely undone. It has to be continuously there to give it its existence. This is the continuous, constant presence of creation that has been there all along, that must continuously stay. It must be there from those 10 original statements. And regarding this, it says, and everybody has their handouts ready. Here it is. I know everybody made sure to print it out and have it with them. This is the quote from Nehemiah. V'atahu, here's the Hebrew, but this is, you give life to them all. That not you did, not once upon a time. It is continuous. Now, the first one says you made, you see here in the bold print, you made, past tense. But here you give, not you gave, you give in current tense. You made, you give. You made them and you are giving them. And here the Alter Rebbe says, Al tikre mechaya, not only you give mechaya here, you give life to them, ela mahava, but even more so, you are continuously giving it. It's not only that you give life, you make them exist. Meaning it could be this is, and now I give it life. You know, you take the lamp, you plug it in, you gave it life, now it lights up. But the lamp exists independent. Here, it's even more than that. Not just that you're giving life to something which already exists. You are giving it existence. The Hainu Yesh Ma'ayin, that is something out of a non-thing. It is that continuous creation. Now you look at the word atah, you see here, and here it is atah, but the way it's written in the pasuk, it's just at. This is what this means here in the parentheses. If you look it up in Nehemiah 9:6, you'll just see the word at, not atah. We read it as atah, but it's at. What is at? Aleph through taf. Bereshis bar Elokim S. In the beginning, God created the letters. Once you have the letters, it's like teaching someone how to read. You have endless opportunity. You can reconfigure them without end. We'll never run out of words. So this is what Hashem created. He created those energy sources. Excuse me. Hey, why then does it have a hey? If Aleph Taf is the letters from Aleph through Taf, from beginning to end, what then is the hey suggest? The 5, and here they are, the 5 groupings of the letters. I know you all printed this out and have it in front of you. I apologize for the redundancy. These are the 5 letter groupings based on whether they're spoken, as we all see. These are the 5 different groupings of how we formulate the pronunciation of the letters. Even though it doesn't have a physical stature to it. But Hashem, of course, communicates to us through speech. Hashem said, let there, didn't write it down. He didn't formulate it, except human beings that God formed him out of the dust and blew the breath of life. So too, Hashem speaks. He says, he speaks the 10 commandments. He speaks to us. V'yedaber Hashem, v'yomer Hashem. We keep on seeing that God said, God told us. B'chinas hizgalas hachaf bezois, that as Hashem compresses himself into these different letter formations, l'neviim, or through the prophets, u'maslapshim b'sichlam v'asagos mamara ha'nevuah, so that he creates this picture for them through the groupings of the letters, and so that they can have a conceptual understanding as well as the verse, the words. Like it says, Ruach Hashem dibar piu umilosai al shaynai. The words of Hashem are within me. They penetrate. That's the characteristic of the prophet and creation itself, that it becomes a greater revelation through Hashem speaking to the individual. As the Arizal writes in his description of prophecy, this is how Hashem creates the world. Creates, current tense. Like it says, with the word of Hashem, the combination of the letters, the heavens are made, that is the spiritually aware, and with the breath of his word, all of the hosts. So breath meaning it's a little less obvious. It's through all these different progressions and all these different configurations until it manifests itself into something tangible, which is not the case with a prophet. A prophet rises above this world. He rises above standard human communication. So it comes from an awareness level of Atzilus. You recognize that? That's the most aware of Hashem. I'm next to Hashem. I have existence, but my existence is Atzilus, Eitzel, next to. That is then invested in a world of creation, which is a little bit more about me. So a prophet has greater awareness, but we could have too. I mean, we're learning this even through science. If we truly studied anything, we would see the no thing within it. I've probably told this story before. It doesn't stop me from telling it again. I once had this guest. It was Pesach, people are talking, and the guy spoke about the bracha hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. And he said, if we would understand what it takes to bring forth bread from the earth, that bracha would mean something completely different to us. We're blessed. We buy it in the store for not a lot of money, and that's it. But what it means to take a sapling, a seed, and plant it in the soil and nourish it and protect it from the animals and grow it and grind it and et cetera, and make fire until you have bread, we would be properly amazed at the, whatever the word is, artistry, I can't think of the proper adjective, of what it means to bring forth bread from the earth. That's pretty amazing, So we're blessed that it's so easy for us. We're talking about technology. I mean, we all lived through where it seemed random and it was so complicated. You had to read book after book. They don't even make books anymore. You can't even buy, it doesn't even come with the book. It just comes with a QR code that you expect it to scan and so on. Again, this is what the emphasis is, that it's not that Hashem is supervising the world, it's that the world only exists because Hashem is giving it existence. So to summarize, not like Hashem says, oh, there's a blade of grass, this is what I wanted to do, which presupposes that blade of grass. It's that Hashem says, I want a blade of grass, so there's a blade of grass. It's not this. Like if you go camping, which you should never do, if you don't bring it, it's not there, right? It's not there. If you didn't bring it, it ain't there. Just to use an analogy that we're familiar with, I mean, we're pretty fortunate. You can pretty much go to Jewel and get anything. But if you don't live in a place like Chicago, you get the kosher order. If you didn't order it, it's not like you run to the Piggly Wiggly for the Chol Yisrael cream cheese. Like, it ain't there. And if you didn't order it, it ain't there. A similar idea. Okay, obviously next week is Shavuos. There'll be ice cream and something. We read the 10 Commandments, I think. And then we'll pick up again, God willing, in 2 weeks. All right. So I have a question.
Thank you.
Someone had a question.
Thank you so much.
Someone had a question.
Yeah, the question so the Hashgacha process is in conjunction with Hashem giving life to every second to everything.
Yes.
And that's why it's Hashgacha process?
That's correct, because it's not that Hashem is overseeing it, which suggests that it exists, and Hashem says, "Oh, let me do this for this." It only exists because Hashem is giving it existence. Again, using my analogy of the novel, why is this guy a dentist? Because I made him a dentist. Why is this guy 32 and not 42? Because I made it that way. He doesn't have independent identity. I made him that way, which is the whole concept. How can we rebel against Hashem? What do you mean? Hashem is making us. How can we do that? Well, that's that thing that he gave us, free choice, which is why we can make bad choices and buy the wrong pair of shoes. But that's the character of it.
One
Okay.
other thing, so the example in the Gemara about the pelican getting the fish,
Uh-huh.
what does that reflect? The idea that Hashem is giving life presently, and that's why the pelican is getting that
Yes,
particular
that's the Baal
fish?
Shem Tov Shita. The Baal Shem Tov's understanding is that that pelican is getting that fish at that moment because that's how Hashem is created that pelican to eat that fish. Even though we will never have any reasonable connection to any human interaction about why this one had to eat that fish, not the other fish. But others disagree. Again, I'm talking about the Rambam. I'm not talking about people who are ignorant. They say, no, for animals and non-human behavior, there's only what's called hashgacha klolius, a general oversight. So pelicans eat fish. Hashem provided enough fish so that the pelicans won't starve it and they won't deplete the fish. But Hashem is not, according to that position, not orchestrating that pelican should eat that fish.
So the Rambam went against that Gemara. Can you say that?
It's not a Gemara. Well, it's the different.
It's in
I don't want to
the Tehillim,
portray
isn't it?
anybody as right, wrong. Clearly the Baal Shem Tov has his own sheet, and the Rambam was a pretty smart guy too. So there's
Yeah.
different ways of how he understands it.
I see. That comes from Tehillim, isn't it, with the pelican and the?
Yeah, that's the basis of it. Yeah, there's a lengthy talk from the Rebbe about it. It's probably available in English. If you Googled around for it, I'll try to find it and send it out with the
All
recording.
right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Have a
you so
good-
much.
Have a good
Okay.
answer.
Have a good week, everyone. A
Good
good
week,
Yom Tov.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.